Last week, Denmark went to the polls for the local and regional elections, and the results were anything but hygge.
Power shifted in unexpected places, long-held mayoral strongholds cracked, and in cities like Copenhagen and Aalborg, the political drama was intense enough to make international headlines. Some parties took surprising hits, others gained ground, and suddenly the political landscape heading into a likely national election next year looks a lot less predictable.
So what actually happened? Who won big? Who stumbled? And what does this tell us about the mood of Danish voters right now? Hey, everybody, you're listening to What Are You Doing in Denmark, the podcast that helps you make Denmark make sense. My name is Derek Hartman.
And I'm Mike Walsh, and today we're going to help you make the local elections make sense with the help of a very special guest.
That's right. To help us unpack all of this, we're joined by somebody who's been covering the elections very closely, Bernardo Basilici Menini. Bernardo is the editor-in-chief of the Copenhagen Post. He's been tracking the numbers, the narratives, and the political maneuvering that has been going on in the past week. And today he's here to help us make sense of what these results really mean. Bernardo, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. Finally, we made it, and I'm so happy for that.
Yes, and a relief to have you here because, we've been following as much as we can, just like a lot of our listeners, but we have questions.
Yes, but many people, I had them questions. So yes, of course. I had many of them, and yeah, weeks studying the Danish political system to get to an answer.
Yeah, and you guys have done such a great job at the Copenhagen Post of not only giving us content to help us prepare for the elections, understand what the elections are, but doing it in English, doing it targeting for the international community, which is something that I just want to, while we have you here, say thank you for, because putting it out there, not with a paywall, is huge in getting information out to voters. And, hopefully, I don't know if we have these numbers back yet, but hopefully I know there was an increase overall in voter turnout, but hopefully amongst the international community as well.
We're going to know it at the beginning of the next year, because for how the system works, those data are not publicly available. Like if you break down the components of the turnout, we're going to know them in probably February or March, but we all hope that this turnout for international people, it's growing a little bit at least. Yeah.
Great. Well, hopefully that increased turnout overall, I would assume must also include internationals, and I'm hoping that your efforts and the efforts that we've tried to do on our show as well have paid off in that regard.
What I think is that if it happens, we're absolutely happy for that. If it doesn't happen, it means that where we are right now, it's a starting point, and which is and it's working out because the interest is bigger than it was in the past, so at least is a starting point.
I think a lot of the parties themselves took notice as well, because a lot of parties were campaigning in multiple languages, at least campaigning in English and Danish, doing campaign events and debates, not only in Danish, but also in English to engage internationals, which I think is just that alone is tremendous.
And it's I think, biggest news if we look at the international participation to the election this time. Foreign Minister of Denmark and former Prime Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen, one of the largest political guys in the country, had a election meeting with internationals. This is something that in Italy, for example, where I do come from, or in many other countries, it wouldn't happen whatsoever. Or you have Radikale Venstre, you mentioned that launched this campaign in 10 different languages, and they had their national leader announcing it to the Copenhagen Post, so an international newspaper. So probably this is why I said it's a huge starting point, because Danish politics and politicians and so on, they are realizing that there's a lot of people who otherwise would be excluded by the democratic life, and it's very un-Danish and unfair.
Plus, it's just smart politics, because it's a pool of voters in the local election that can participate that are almost going untapped.
Maybe to ground us, Bernardo, can you kind of take us through, for people that are new to Danish politics or new to Denmark or hearing this, maybe ground us in what happened. So what were the elections of last week? Why do they matter? Kind of help people that are coming along from this, that are new to Denmark, new to the podcast, new to understanding Danish politics.
What happened last week is that all the 98 municipalities and 4 regions, so you had the whole country having municipal/local/regional election. They are important, and they were important because it's the whole lower level of government in Denmark who was on election. The results themselves are significant by the simple fact that next year we're going to have general elections, so election for the parliament, for electing the parliament that will appoint the new prime minister, who's now is Mette Frederiksen. The local elections were considered as some sort of test for next year general election. In general, what we could see is that the party government lost in Denmark, politics is not conflict and competition. It's a little bit maybe, but it's mostly cooperation. So maybe here saying winning and losing, it's not the best word, but the parties in the government lost mostly Social Democrats, the largest and most important party in the country, the party of the prime minister. And they lost, give or take 5% on an aggregated level, on national level, but mostly they lost mayors. They had around, give or take, 40 mayors across the country, 40%, give or take, and now they have 30 overall. So a huge loss in both, in all the possible ways. Also Venstre, the other party government, lost a little bit, even though not that much. Moderaterne, the third party government, the smallest, was for them it was a huge defeat because they got I think I seem to remember on aggregated level 2-3%, way far from their goal, which is between 5 and 9%.
And just to drill in on that a little bit for those who don't understand, I have to admit I'm not crystal clear on it as well, because I think each municipality can do something slightly different. But in general, the way that the Lord Mayor, or what we would call the mayor, coming to power or getting to be elected is basically by all of the seats on the city council or the municipal council are basically coming together. All of those members are then picking one person to be the mayor. Is that correct?
Exactly. It's not, you don't have a direct election. So what happens is that people in a municipality, like say, for example, where I do come from, Frederiksberg, they elect all the people in the city council. Then the city council, all the members of the city council from different parties, Social Democrats, Radikale Venstre, Conservative, blah, blah, blah. All of them, they have meeting, like political meeting, and they talk and discuss and until they find an agreement, which usually it's not a 50% plus one agreement. In general, what they try to do is they try to have a broad consensus on the person who is then the mayor. So rarely you have parties like piling up votes until they reach simply one vote of majority and then we go for that person. Right. No, usually you have 70 or 80% of the votes, the parties having the 70% or 80% of the votes agreeing on one person because they want to have this broad consensus. The result of this, it's something that for people like us coming from countries where politics is way more conflictual, it's somehow weird but and beautiful. I think.
You're saying Italian and American politics are a little different?
Yeah, exactly, and a little bit, hardcore political conflict. Something that there would never happen, and here happens, is that in the city government, Copenhagen, for example, now you have both the very left-wing parties and the conservatives in the same government. So you have a mayor for school and children, conservative, so right-wing, undoubtedly right-wing, right? And you have the environmental and technical mayor, who's the Red Green Alliance, which is the left, almost the leftist party in Danish politics, and that's interesting.
Kind of big takeaways from the election. So the current government is of the middle. It's essentially a moderate coalition, center-left, center-right, and a moderate party on there. Would you say that overall it was a referendum on the governing coalition? Did you see movement from the middle out? Did you see movement from left to right or right to left? How would you describe kind of on an aggregate level how things moved nationally?
A Dane would probably tell you that it was not a referendum because they say, and to some extent they're right, that they can keep the two things separate. Like when we vote local, we vote local. When we vote national, we vote national. I'll make an example. Usually, for example, in the USA, if you vote Democrats, give or take at all the levels. And this is give or take the same things that happen in Italy. Like you don't jump from one coalition to another. Here it's pretty common to vote, for example, on the left on local level and on the right to the national level. So this must be said. Once this is said, yes, it was somehow a referendum because next year elections and so probably yes, the voters didn't like or not liking the government parties and probably they said, no guys, you're not doing where we think you should go, and so that's the main thing. And so that huge block in the middle is losing votes, no doubts about it. Like numbers wise, it's there. On the right, there's not a huge shift on the far right, so to speak. Here you have two parties like right-wing populist, more hardcore, so to speak, right-wing parties, Dansk Demokraterne and Dansk Folkeparti, Danish Democrats and Danish People's Party. They grew, but not that much, actually. It's not happening what happened, for example, with Alternative für Deutschland or in Germany, where you had the supposedly little parties reaching like 10 or 15%. No. They grew, but not that much. So the shift, it's not that much on the right. On the left, something is moving because apparently, from what we see now, the baricentrum, the needle in the left wing area was Social Democrats, and this is shifting from them to the Socialistische Volkspartij (SF). Probably this is the main thing that is happening on the left.
Just to go back a little bit to the mayors, and maybe we see some of this happening in the way that these coalitions have formed in certain municipalities around Denmark. Two that Mike kind of teased in the opening, but that I'd like to talk more about are, of course, two of the larger cities in Denmark, and I'm wondering if they're a bit of a bellwether. I'd like to talk about Aalborg and Copenhagen specifically.
It all started in Copenhagen because they lost Copenhagen for the first time ever. After 100 years of social democratic government, they lost it. And the new mayor, it's Socialistische Volkspartij, and this was the main story that was covered nationwide, but also internationally from media from many countries. And this was a huge political drama because losing the capital after you govern it for 100 years, it's a huge thing. And also it highlighted the fact that probably the Social Democrats in that scenario were not able or are not able anymore to be the political leader. So the one who's able to kind of like organize the consensus so that at the end they're going to be mayor. And this was the great political skill historically of the Social Democrats. Now, while this was happening, at least they had this consolation prize that the Social Democrats I'm talking about, that they kept the other three main cities, Aarhus, Aalborg, and Odense. And some days after the election, where they were sure that they secured the mayorship, what happened is that in Aalborg, at some point, the current, which is now the current mayor, Social Democrats, apparently he lost the majority. Sorry?
Friend of the podcast.
And also, he was he is very open with international people.
Oh, very
he
much.
Also got, we interviewed him, and he was very nice. But he almost lost the mayorship because, as I said, you have those negotiations ongoing inside the city council and behind the curtains, which is of course fine. And he almost lost the majority, and that would have been huge for the Social Democrats because losing 2 cities and 5% of the votes and 10 mayors, and also the regions went right, all of them except one. That would have been at that point a big political defeat.
Something I've heard from friends here that voted as well is that a lot of this was a bit of a message to Mette Frederiksen, the prime minister, and seeing that in Copenhagen, it was her handpicked, Pernille Rosenkrantz-Theil, who she handpicked to go run for mayor. Aalborg is her hometown, where she comes from. Something I've heard anecdotally is that people are saying they voted against Social Democrats as a message ahead of the national election, to put you on the spot a little bit to project towards next year. Do you think that this was a message and that these voters are going to come back home to Social Democrats, or is this a shift that we can probably expect in the national election next year?
Yes, it was a message, and if Social Democrats don't change the direction, their trajectory, they're gonna see it. I suppose in the votes next year. Mette Frederiksen was the person. This is interesting because she personally chose the candidate for Copenhagen, as you said, Pernille Rosenkrantz-Theil, the current Social Democrats mayor, last vice, because he's still the mayor. The shift will happen formally, officially at the beginning of the new year. He was kind of like popular and appreciated by the voters and the citizens, from what we could see, and also by the other parties. But apparently, Mette Frederiksen said, "No, you're not going to run because you're not the right person," and chose Pernille Rosenkrantz-Theil, and that was a huge mistake. Also because Pernille Rosenkrantz-Theil didn't run a good campaign, couldn't establish herself as a popular person, and something that I personally found a little bit awful is that when she lost, she said, "I'm gonna retire from politics."
To me, that is emblematic of the whole fiasco.
Exactly.
Because in a way, I felt like, to take it all the way back to Mette Frederiksen getting personally involved in Copenhagen's mayoral election, I think that alone sort of projects this idea of like, oh no, you must have like Mother Mette like decide who's going to run this city that she's not from, and really has nothing to do with it. Why are you injecting national politics into it when it's convenient, but then wanting to back off of it when you want it to be just a local election? To me, that just seemed like it was a disaster to begin with.
Not only to you, the Social Democrats, the Social Democrats as a party, the ground level of the didn't like it at all, and we're talking about the people in the same party, and they knew it was gonna end bad, and it ended badly. I mean, it was visible. And it's something that usually you don't do. It was not appreciated at any level, and the results were pretty visible. And something when we interviewed for this issue here of our magazine, we interviewed Penny Rosenkrantz-Steil. I interviewed her personally, and I asked her, "What is the problem? Do you think of the Social Democrats?" And she said, "We don't have a generational change inside the party, like a turnout." That was emblematic because she's not a fresh young candidate chosen from the. And so
she's been a member of parliament. She's been around for years.
And she was chosen by the very apex of the party. So in this sense, Mette Frederiksen chose the wrong person and probably made a bad decision. In politics, you don't know the decision is bad until you see the results. So we have to, that's something that must be said. On the other hand, probably the Social Democrats, the way she's leading the Social Democrats, she's bringing them a little bit rightish or more than a little. And this probably it's not appreciated by their voters that are probably, for what we can see, looking at the other left-wing parties, such as, for example, SF, or some of them are looking at the right-wing parties. So this strategy is not working out for now, at least at all. And next year, probably, if they don't change trajectory, as I said, this is going to be very probably visible.
Digging into that a little bit, I'm curious if we think that's something that overall is going to be a strategy change, that maybe they'll back off of some of these things. To sort of put it from my perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me like Social Democrats have shifted rightward, specifically on immigration. As an international, that's something I pay attention to the most, so perhaps I'm just skewed in how I look at that. But it seems to me like they've gone to the right on immigration. In my mind, then as a voter, why wouldn't I just vote for people who do it better? I'm not saying that you would go to that you would go from Social Democrat voter to voting for Danske Folkeparti. But maybe people are like, why would I want DF light when I could just go all the way? And it seems to me like if you were going to go to the right on immigration as a Social Democrat, why wouldn't you do that from traditional Social Democrat values, meaning from a perspective of protecting labor, protecting jobs here? It seems like they just went there on the xenophobic sort of like nationalism, talking mostly about culture, not necessarily about protecting Danish workers or things like that. That's my perspective. Would you agree?
It's right. It's a perfect analysis. That's what happened, actually. The Social Democrats are moving right on immigration. The new Minister of Immigration that was chosen 3-4 months ago, Rasmus Stoklund, is a hardliner who doesn't miss one single opportunity to write on social media that immigrants, not that good, Muslim immigrants, terrible, Arab immigrants, oh my God, way worse. And he does this on a daily basis. And also Mette Frederiksen, we know that it's she's taking stances that are not soft on international. And that's the whole point. Why? Because traditionally the Social Democrats are the party of the workers and we're the working class. And so they're thinking, and to some extent they're right, the working class is scared by international people. They see them as immigrants. Again, so they're people who they're changed their lifestyle, their culture, they're still their jobs and blah, blah, blah. And so they're probably doing this. They think that they are addressing the concerns of the component of the piece of the society they usually represent, the working class, as I said. So this is why they're moving right. You mentioned Venstre and Conservative. They are very soft with international people and immigrants, despite being on the right wing. Like they're very, very soft, which is for us is maybe surprising because again, right wing usually it's kind of like hard, and they were very soft and incredibly open. You said right. You picked the right name when you mentioned Dansk Folkeparti and Dansk Demokraterne. They are hard on immigration, and so probably the Social Democrats thought our people, working class, are moving to the position of this and are voting this Dansk Demokraterne and Dansk Folkeparti. So what we have to do is to kind of like challenge them there. But as you said, it's not working out. I deeply think that people, if they have to pick between the original and an imitation, they're gonna vote for the original. And so going strongly on the right, it's not paying at all.
Staying on the right and talking a bit, you mentioned before talking about generational change. There's one party we haven't really talked about yet, which is Liberal Alliance, and they're one that's made a lot of gains in politics over the last several years. Their leader, Alex Vanopslagh, is seen as a very charismatic person, kind of bringing that generational change as well. They're quite popular with young voters across Denmark, and they had a very good night, it seems, as well. How do you see them as what their results were in the election and what their prospects are looking for next year's federal election as well?
Well, they are growing also because yes, they have a very popular leadership. Alex Vanopslagh, he's charismatic. He's a smart man. He's experienced despite being relatively young. So probably they are growing and they're gonna make probably good results. What is not going to happen? This is something that I know from inside the Folketinget. They don't think they're going to be able to secure a governing position, such as, for example, the premiership. So they're not going to be they're not going to be able to appoint the prime minister. The next prime minister will not probably be able will be from Liberal Alliance, simply because they are too far from the center. As I said before, Danish political system is based on consensus. You don't want to have a person who can only gather 50 or a little bit more % of the votes. You want someone who has a broad consensus, and they are liberal in their name, but they're actually liberist if you look at the economic proposal. So no taxation, less government, blah blah blah.
More libertarian.
More liberal, and this is something that many political parties in Denmark don't like at all. Also, they don't want to have they don't want to have more government, more public, but they don't want to have less. So they're kind of like hardcore and strong in their political agenda, and it's hard to gather consensus around a very strong political agenda in Denmark.
Interesting that they seem to have a very maybe soft support where people support them because they like their leader, but maybe in the actual halls of power, they don't have that same kind of power in that way yet, either because they're too new on this or their positions are too out of the norm for Denmark. Really interesting.
It looks like they're going to go from 9 to 125 council seats, so they're doing something right.
Yeah, but they're doing well. Also, the aesthetic that they have, their candidate at Copenhagen's Copenhagen municipality, Alexander Ryle, he has used the English pronunciation because his family is from the Great Britain and Canada, and he had this huge advertisement in the bus, like two floor bus, and it's like meters and meters large, saying "Mere Copenhagen, mindre kommune," more Copenhagen, less municipality. Again, like strong political stance to say we don't want public institution. They have to be, individuals must be free to do whatever they want. So they have clear proposal and a charismatic leadership, which again, from many countries we come from, that's the perfect way to get success. In Denmark, it's not that way. You have to be reliable. You have to be able to gather consensus. It's probably they're not yet maybe at the point of doing that.
The consensus is interesting. I remember seeing some post-election interviews where, in particular in Copenhagen, they were interviewing, I forget which party he was from one of the far right parties, but who still supported the new mayor from SF, and basically said, yeah, we've worked together, like it's okay. We're from different political beliefs. We fight each other, but when it comes to making sure the schools work and the streets get taken care of, we're on the same page. It's interesting how that kind of collaboration is so ingrained despite stark political differences.
Yes, and this is why Liberal Alliance it will hardly get a governing position, as well as the Red Green Alliance, because they can work together. But you have again broad consensus. We all live in the city or in this country. What happens in our countries, as soon as you win the election, you take the ball and you run as fast as possible. So you have 5 years or 4 years or 7 years. And then probably you're gonna be kicked out. And here it's different. Here it's okay, guys. Now we won the election. We chill out. Okay, we have a beer together. We discuss about it, and we figured that out. And again, I personally like this very much, and I think it's one of the things that it's allowing Denmark to have this strong democratic performance.
Another interesting story coming out of the result, women are making up for the first time now a majority of the elected representation on the regional council level. As well, mayoral positions now having a record high number of women. 24 out of the 98 municipalities are projected to be having a female mayoral position will be held by a female. It seems like there's a pretty meaningful shift. Is there anything we can read into that, or is that just the fact of Denmark being pretty egalitarian and sending strong leaders of both genders?
Pretty egalitarian. Yesterday we published an article. There's still a salary gap of 12% in Denmark. So usually on average, men earn 12% more than women. Still, there's a problem of violence against women that has to be eradicated. Point is, as many things that we observe, things are not perfect, but things still they're going way better than in many other countries of the world, most of the countries of the world. But you're right, 50%, half give or take of the elected in regional councils are women, as well as something that, and this is we dedicated the cover of the last magazine. Many of us come from countries where you don't have three women competing for the mayoral position of you have three men.
Capital.
Exactly,
Right.
and you usually have maybe one woman, and this is brilliant. I mean, the way Denmark is.
That's why three men need to sit on a podcast and talk about it.
Exactly.
It's really important.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's somehow ironic. Yes, it's somehow ironic. You're right. And still, another data. The Kommunavalg, so to the municipalities were 33%. Yes, were women, so minority. So as we can see here, there's still something to do. But again, its situation is better than many other countries. Most of it.
Do you think having this increase in women, and the fact that if only 33% of the candidates were women, but then nearly half were actually elected, do you think there's something that's going to translate into how that's governed, that people want women in power because they see them as able to drive these things, especially for, say, the regional Kommunavalg, it's very focused on more, say, home issues, talking about schools and healthcare and things like that?
What I seem to see is that here in Denmark, they're a little bit less biased probably than in the rest of the world, where power and trustworthiness in the power, it's associated to men, and it's a huge bias.
Of course.
Probably here they are a little bit less biased. They can smell a good politician when they see one, and they're not biased. They don't think of. They don't probably look at gender, which is the only thing that I seem to see. But I think I should stay here and observe the country for other 20 years to be able to give a better answer.
Well, let's look ahead a little bit. So to sort of summarize where we are, get a little bit of a baseline here. So we had an increase in participation, which is wonderful. We had a bit of a rough night for the parties who are in government. So sort of the centrist government at the national level right now, which of course would be Moderata, Social Democrats, and Venstre. All three parties had a tough night. Probably the toughest was Social Democrats as far as the loss in number of votes and mayoralships. A bit of a rise on the left and the right, but not necessarily on the far left and far right or the fringe parties. I would say that's pretty much where we are right now. Looking ahead, in particular for the next year, we've signaled that there's probably going to be some strategy shifts, some messaging shifts from some of the parties going into the national elections, which will be held next year. What do you think we should look out for? And what do you think some of these parties may be adjusting or maybe even doubling down on when we're talking about some that had gains like Liberal Alliance and SF, the Socialist Volksparty? What do you think we can expect?
We still don't know when the general elections will be held. There's only one person who knows, Mette Frederiksen, because here in Denmark it's the prime minister to hold the election. What we know is that they're gonna be in 2026, either probably we suppose in the spring or in the fall. We're not gonna have them in July. That's the general understanding and common sense.
Those people are going to be voting from Majorca.
In my case, yes, Italy or close to Florence, where I come from. Yes, exactly. And that's the starting point, which means that probably we are already in the election campaign now. Sure. Even though, again, Denmark is not a country where the election campaign is so strong, so visible, so cartoonish as in many other countries of the world, but still probably we are already in the election campaign. Point number one. Point number two, the right-wing parties are growing to the point that now they can aim to have a government on, not probably on their own, but kind of like, and if they manage to convince Moderaterne and other parts, they can form a government, which is going to be probably a moderate right-wing government, but still with one or two ministries given to the far right. And that may be, for international people, the most problematic thing, because it depends what they're going to want to have.
You know what they're going to want to have.
If Dansk Folkeparti or Dansk Democrat, they will choose the immigration ministry, here comes the pain, probably. Also because despite the other right-wing parties having soft position on immigration, it's in the negotiation, then it's complicated. And parties in the governments at some point they simply want to cash in.
Why are they so obsessed with us?
We're such nice people.
Yeah.
And that's one thing. So probably I would say that the whole politics is shifting on the right. So after a few years of this center government, we're going towards right. Without considering something, which is Socialistisk Folkeparti. And that's, I think, maybe huge. Why? because they may fill the vacuum left by the Social Democrats, not only in terms of popularity, so a big part. Now they're, give or take, 10 to 15%, 17, 18, depends where you look at, where, like which municipality or region. But not only, maybe not mainly, if you consider at the size of the party, but the ability of the party to gather consensus around a political project or an alternative. That has been the key of the political success of Social Democrats for 100 years. Like you don't rule, you don't govern without us because we're good. Yeah. Simply, we're good. We know how to do that, and we have a pretty strong agenda, and people can gather around that agenda. Social Democrats are leaving a vacuum behind them. Maybe they're going to be able to understand the mistake and move back or move elsewhere. But if they don't do that, still. Socialist Party can do that. They have a very capable leadership. They're good. They understand. They smell the air. They know how to move. They have a strong agenda, and they are smart. They are experienced. And all these things, usually in politics, they're extremely good skills, mostly in Danish politics.
Interesting. And I think the leader of SF, so Pia Olsen Dyr, I think she might be the most popular politician in Denmark today. And it's interesting for me how her party had a good night. She's super popular. Liberal had a good night. Alexander Vanessa's super popular. Demokraterne, they had a good night. Their first real night running. They have a very popular leader in Inger Støjberg as well. And obviously, Mette Frederiksen didn't have a good night as her handpicked people didn't have a good night themselves. And you can see kind of in that way. For national elections, I'll put you on the spot right now. Where do you think Denmark's next prime minister is going to come from? Where do you think is going to emerge from this? Because you have Social Democrats are wounded. They have to figure out how they're going to run their next election. You have very popular parties on, I don't want to say the fringes, but getting outside of the center. There's also, I think, a leadership vacuum in the middle. Who's going to fill that gap?
And when are we going to get deported?
The thing is, when you try to make forecasts in politics, you make a mistake.
Absolutely.
So probably now I'm going to say a couple of names. They're not going to be prime minister for sure because of the because I just mentioned them.
We'll burn these tapes. Don't worry.
I'm burning their political guys. I'm sorry. If the government goes right, so to speak, it cannot probably be Dansk Folkeparti, Dansk Demokraterne, because they're too extreme.
Sure.
Unless they get 40% of the votes. Yeah. Now they're together 6, but you never know. In politics, you never know. But it's going to be there. Hardly it's going to be Venstre, because they're not doing well in the government. Almost impossible Moderaterne. So the issue that you have left is Liberal Alliance that has the problem that I said before, like they're a little bit too extreme. So probably it should land in the conservatives area, a possible prime minister. Possibly, now that I said so, it's not going to be this way.
Right.
On the left, if the government is more on the left wing or mainly on the left wing, someone from social SF, I believe. You said something and you're absolutely right. They have a talent in choosing their candidates. Where Social Democrats made a mistake and are making a mistake, for example, like persecuting a candidate from the top of the party, Pernille Rosenkrantz style, this SF they're doing the opposite. They're picking the right people, the right candidates in all the election, European, as you said, Kommunavalg and so on. So if the government is on the left, probably it's going to be someone from SF. This said, a lot of time in Denmark, you have governments that are neither on the left nor on the right. So you may have a government which is like a couple of parties from the left, a couple of parties from the... So, there's the gray area in between. It's a gray area that accounts for maybe 40% of the possibilities. So a pretty big one.
Do you think that's because of trust? I'm just curious with the SF. I mean, obviously you mentioned, you both did, that they're picking the right candidates, they're picking popular people. Yeah. I mean, hey, who would have thought that picking popular people to run is a good way to get right. to win elections? But I'm wondering if even just in at the national level, if that will go forward, because trust is something you hear all the time in this country, right? It's a high trust society. We trust people. It seems to me like maybe that's been the current low point for Social Democrats, is that it's hard to trust because they sort of turn their back on their traditional political allies and on the left by forming a centrist government 3.5-4 years ago. Would you say that that's accurate, or am I missing something here?
Yes and no. First, you said something. You said, who would have said that choosing Social Democrats, they made this mistake and they're not, newcomers. Mette Frederiksen is a lot of people have issues with her agenda.
She's
but
a good politician.
a very good politician,
Yes.
and a very good stateswoman. I mean, she's been governing Denmark in the hardest time in decades,
Yes.
and she's a very, and her party is a very strong and they're smart people and they're experienced people. This is to say, everyone can make mistake strategically or tactically speaking. So this is the first thing. The second point, usually being in the government with the parties from the other area, it's not a huge problem in Denmark. In many countries, it's seen as like you're betraying, right? You're going with the other guys. Why are you hanging out with, why not us? Here, usually, it's not a huge problem. Now, this government, it was seen as a little bit unnatural since the beginning, but this is not a huge issue. Again, it's in Denmark political DNA to say, okay, no one can secure a broader majority, so it's fine. Let's try to let's do it with what we have. So because the government somehow it's been able to keep the door open for other parties on specific agenda points. We receive on a daily basis press releases saying that this reform was voted and approved by other government parties and other 4 parties. So I wouldn't say that this is their main problem.
There could be strange alliances across the political spectrum. I'm wondering maybe more if it's that having 3 parties from the center in government has in almost the way that there's like a little bit of an anti-incumbency, or those who are out of power, are they growing because people genuinely want what they're selling? Like, do people generally want a libertarian or a socialist folk party? Or is it just the fact that they're not in power, that they're growing in support?
Probably the second. I mean, even though we are in Denmark, which is way more mature and responsible democracy, being in power, it's not a great way to get.
It's so much easier being out of power and
Exactly.
yelling at those in power.
Indeed, exactly.
Right.
Even in Denmark,
Right.
Where you don't have the same problem that you have in the rest of the world, which is actually if the left governs, then the election are going to be won by the rights and vice versa. That give or take how it happens. Here in Denmark, it's a little bit different and a little bit better, but still being governed. You're not the popular guy usually.
No.
If you are in government and you have to cancel the Great Prayer Day,
Right.
and you have to raise taxes. And
Did
you
they have to do that?
it was not again. It was not a.
I think that's where things started going south.
Exactly. No, yeah, you're right. The political analyst of the Copenhagen Post, Sune Stefan Hansen, who's a very important political analyst in the country, he said the same. He said it's from that the abolition of the cancellation of the Great Prayer Day as a national holiday that things have started to go bad for them. So guys in power are not popular usually.
That must be where I got that good knowledge in his editorial in the Copenhagen Post. Yeah.
Or maybe you're just very skilled about Danish politics, which may be the case fairly.
I do my best. I think it's part of the responsibility of living here. And
Absolutely.
And on that note, I also have to thank you for what you do to help us today, but of course also at the Copenhagen Post to help all of us in English and us internationals understand a little bit more what's going on around us.
Thank you for what you do, guys, because we're doing kind of like the same thing. We're working on different sides of the same thing, which is be work so that people can know and can live in Denmark, feel in Denmark as their home, knowing what is happening, knowing what is happening in this beautiful community. Somehow hard to understand, as you know. I mean, like making sense of that. Sometimes it's hard, but thank you for what you do, guys.
Hey, one of the core Danish values is to participate in democracy. So it's important that we all do our part.
It's going to be an interesting year ahead. But Bernardo, thanks so much for helping us today.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
And thank you all for listening and watching. Hi.